G'day, my name's Nick Linden. I'm a livestock officer with Agriculture Victoria, and today we're just going to do some quick calculations on how much to feed your sheep. It's a really important calculation to get right, because if you feed too much, one, you're wasting money, but two, you can also run into issues come lambing or at different times of the year. And by the time you notice that you've got it wrong, things can really have blown out and caused a far bigger problem. So it's something we need to get right, and if you go the other way, you underfeed, obviously you can be compromising animal performance, which hurts your bottom line as well. With the high costs of grain, it's just something that we've got to be getting right to make sure that our animal production is where it needs to be. So when we're calculating how much to feed, we're essentially doing a feed budget. And just like any budget, there's two sides to the equation. There's what we need versus what we've got. And for this scenario, what we need is the energy requirements of a 60 kilo dry ewe, and what we've got to be able to feed the ewe to meet her requirements is we've got some barley that we've had feed tested, and we know that it's 12 megajoules of metabolisable energy per kilo of dry matter, and it's also 90% dry matter. So these are our two components. We've got what are the energy requirements of our 60 kilo dry ewe versus this is the feed that we've got to actually meet her energy requirements. How do we best marry those two up? Now, how much an animal needs depends on so many things. It depends, is she lactating? It depends if she got singles or twins. Depends what's her size. Is she small framed or is she large framed? All those things will have an impact on what her energy requirements are. And it's hard to know what they all are. No one's going to remember it all. The best advice is to probably go to some of the tools, go to some of the tables that are available in some of the resources like a drought feeding booklet. And if I go to the drought feeding booklet and I open it up for our sheep, I can look up the table there, and it's a really simple table to assess and to look up, and you can say, okay, for a 60 kilo sheep that's dry and mature weight, she needs 57 megajoules per week. So that's on a weekly basis, that's her energy requirements. So if we just put that up on the board and work through some calculations, that animal has a 57 megajoule per week requirement. And we know the feed we've got has 12 megajoules of energy for every kilo of dry matter that's in that feed. So now we just need to work that through, and it's a simple case of dividing out. If she needs 57 megajoules on a weekly basis, and each kilo of barley has 12 megajoules in it, how many kilos do we need to be feeding her? So our 57 divided by our 12 megajoules, and I'll just go to my calculator quickly. We've got 57 megajoules divided by the 12 megajoules that are in every kilo of the feed, means that that ewe, for that condition, a 60 kilo ewe, requires 4.75 kilograms of dry matter per week. So we've calculated that that ewe, a 60 kilo ewe that's dry, requires 4.75 kilos of our barley every week. It's not quite the end of the calculations, because what we need to account for is, we need to remember 10% of this barley is moisture that's got actually no nutritional value to it at all. So we need to account for the dry matter in that feed. So how we do that, we just go into the calculator again quickly. Our 4.75, we divide that by the 90%. So we know that because we've done a feed test, we know the grain's 90% dry matter. So we can divide that by 0.9, which is our 90%. So if I do that, 4.75 divided by 0.9 is 5.3. I've just rounded up slightly there. So on an as-fed basis, so calculating from the dry matter basis to an as-fed basis, we need to feed those ewes 5.3 kilos of feed per week. And then we just need to multiply that up based on the mob size, for the number of sheep that you're going to be feeding at any given time. It seems not a big difference when we're talking about grain, given that it's 90% dry matter, but if you're feeding a different class of stock, and if you're feeding a different feed, such as a hay that's, or a silage even, that's a higher percentage in dry matter, higher percentage of moisture, so a lower dry matter, we really do need to be able to correct for that percentage of dry matter versus as fed. So if we use the New South Wales drought feed calculator to do our feed budget, it's the same inputs. We need to think about what's the stock class that we're feeding. So let's enter in that the sheep that we're feeding are 60 kilos live weight, because that will set what their energy requirement is. And then in the app, you can actually select from a number of different feeds. You can see down across the bottom of the app screen there, you've got different options. Let's select feed number 2 for this scenario because it's the same barley that we looked at earlier, which we've set at 12 megajoules, 90% dry matter, $350 a tonne. So let's select that as the feed that we're going to supplement these ewes with, or that we're going to feed them with. And then you can vary the feeding period. Let's just look at feeding 1 day for one animal and see what values that it generates for us. But obviously if you're feeding a larger mob of sheep, you put in the numbers that replicate yours. Now the daily feed requirement then on an as-fed basis, so that's been adjusted for dry matter, is 0.74 kilos per day. And if we want to multiply that out by the 7 days, it comes out really close to the 5.3 kilos that we calculated on a weekly basis earlier. But you can see the app actually takes that sum a little bit further. Not only does it cost out the ration on a per day basis, but it'll actually give you a total, if you were to select that you're feeding for 30 days, it'll actually generate the total ration cost over that time as well as the total amount of feed that you're going to need to feed that number of stock for that predetermined time.
So in this example, we talked about a couple of resources that you can find on the Feeding Livestock website that are useful when you're actually calculating how much you need to feed your stock. So probably one of the easiest ways to find them is to go into sheep resources or beef resources. The tables are in both, depending on what species you're talking about. And if you go down to your useful tables, now we were all talking about what the energy requirements are of stock. So you can see there listed, the second heading is the energy requirements and the protein requirements of different classes of stocks. And when you just click on that link, it just scrolls down to that table and you can see for all of those different categories of stock or classifications of stock, it lists out their DSE rating, but also their daily energy requirements per day and the protein levels as well. There are some other places where you can find similar information though. So if we go back to the home page, and it's important to know on the Feeding Livestock website, at the top left hand of the screen is always the home button, which just takes you back to the start. So for wherever you are, you can always navigate your way back to the start. But if we go back down to the drought booklets, and again, in this example, we'll just talk about sheep, but it's equally applicable in the beef book as well. If you click on that sheep book, it takes you to the link to open the whole book. But if you don't want to go to the whole book, it's really easy just to navigate through the list of chapters on the right-hand side. So in terms of what we need to feed, chapter 3 gives us a nice logical explanation. We open up chapter 3 and we can just scroll straight down to that similar table, which shows again the energy and protein requirements for the whole range of different classes of stock. Now, the other example, or the other tool that we referred to was the New South Wales Drought Feeding app. So let's go through the cattle pathway to find that information. You can see at the bottom there, it's just called the Beef Tools and Calculators. It's exactly the same link as the pathway you would go through from sheep. But if you're looking from a beef example, we just open up those useful tools. We scroll down till we find the New South Wales Drought Feed Calculator app, and we can click on that button, which takes us to the link to show you what the application looks like. Now, obviously you need to download that onto your device, be it a phone or an iPad, through the App Store, but that's the link that you're looking for. You can see what it looks like. And again, there's a couple of screenshots down the bottom that just show you what that interface is like and what sort of information you need to put in, as well as the outputs that you'll get out of that calculator.
Calculating how much to actually feed your stock takes some of the guesswork out of actually doing it. And it's really important to do. You need to maximise the return on your expenses. So you're spending money on expensive grain, we need to make sure that you get the best return for it and that you're feeding the appropriate amount to your animals. Match to their class of stock, so you know, are they dry, are they lactating, are they pregnant, what are their requirements? Let's feed them appropriately based on what we've got, which is then knowing from your feed test what the energy and protein of that feed is. It's about matching up those two requirements, what they need versus what you have to meet the animal's requirements.